patient. Instead, the response was, let's make sure we have donors that we can call upon in order to meet that need.
The blood bankers have made the world responsive to the requests and needs of surgeons, anesthesiologists, critical care doctors. So there is always money in the bank. Those physicians who are using the products, the end users of the product, have just simply always got an open checkbook to write and take something out of the bank.
All these men down here, they only get $5 a pint for their blood.
How much you go there?
$5, but we're striking this blood bank. We're going to take them one at a time. We're asking people to please cooperate with our picket line. We're asking $15 a pint for whole blood, $9 a pint for plasma. We feel it's a struggle for dignity.
The years prior to 1972, where hepatitis B was the biggest threat for blood safety, and since the average transfusion back in the early days was 4 units, you had virtually 100% chance of acquiring hepatitis B from being transfused. Many states enacted legal protection for blood collectors and transfusion practices known as blood shield statutes, which basically said everybody knows you get hepatitis B from a transfusion. So you, the consumer, cannot sue the hospital, the treating physician, or the blood center just because you get hepatitis B. The public felt that blood transfusion was so necessary that the risk of having hepatitis B was just one of those consequences that you would expect to get.
Donation of blood is a source of income for many people in developing countries. There is no control in terms of selection of donors. You got paid, you gave blood, and that was it. So any disease you're harboring certainly could enter into the blood system by delivery to a distribution center.
Number one collector of blood in the Philippines is the Philippine Red Cross. The source of blood is coming from blood banks, commercial blood banks. And the commercial blood banks gets their blood from paid donors who queue up almost like every week to sell their blood. And you can just imagine what kind of people they are. They survive on their blood. They sell their blood. And so you would imagine that these are people who are financially strapped, people who may not have the right nutrition to eat, people who may have diseases in their blood. One can easily understand why complications can really come in. Testing may not be that reliable. And so this is a source of problem.
Only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
With the sudden and unexpected appearance in the early 1980s of a brand new transfusion-transmitted infection, just really set the profession back on its heels.
We now have every day 1,900 people in hospital beds with HIV illness. By 1993, we are going to need 4,000 to 5,000 hospital beds a day. We're going to have 1 million outpatient visits a year from AIDS and AIDS-related illness.
The impact had global consequences. The international distribution of materials, for example, the U.S. was at that time a very large exporter of plasma components for use in hemophiliacs globally. And as a practical matter, as just the financial circumstances of the world, as this knowledge was evolving, plasma that had the HIV virus in it was distributed globally.
That they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus. They took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factor VIII. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children.
The transmission of HIV was not the only thing that we recognized. We also recognized hepatitis C. And probably, if you looked at transmission of disease, the killer, the largest killer, probably was hepatitis C rather than HIV. So something went wrong with this so-called therapy, if you will, which saved lives.
And the consequence of that subsequent data have shown is that the demand for or the use of blood began to drop. Having physicians not asking for blood to be transfused had no apparent ill effect on patients. In the 80s, stimulated a whole new way of thinking about how to keep blood safe.
While the American people, I think, can take heart from the fact that the nation's blood supply is safer than it has ever been, I must point out that I still have doubts that it is safe as it should and can be. It is the goal of this subcommittee. I believe it is the goal of the Red Cross, and I'm satisfied that it is the drug of the Food and Drug Administration, that we will move forward towards what will ultimately be the safest and the best blood supply for the people of this country.
Beginning in 1996-97, the demand for blood unexpectedly was rising very fast. And in fact, it rose much faster in the 5 years between 1997 and 2002 than the drop that had occurred over the 10 years prior to that time, and it has continued to this day. It's all about the physicians became comfortable that blood was safe again.
The blood bankers have done a fantastic job of eliminating the major risks of hepatitis C and AIDS, HIV. So those risks are vanishingly small, but all that does is uncover all the remaining risks of blood transfusion.
The story about the people from New Guinea and the incidence of cannibalism and the transmission of disease through either transfusing or transplanting or ingesting is one of the issues that makes the blood supply very vulnerable. Kuru is one of those families of the slow neurological diseases that is thought to be transmitted through prion or protein particles. Now that practice of cannibalism has been stopped, and the disappearance of disease suggests again very closely that this was related to the ingestions of these particles through cannibalism.
Judy Kenny lost her husband Derek to new variant CJD. He'd been given 4 pints of blood in 1996 during an operation. He died of CJD 6 years later, and it was only because his wife complained they subsequently discovered one of those pints was contaminated.
Variant CJD and so-called mad cow disease, all thought to be prion-derived diseases, or some may be related to slow viruses that attack the central nervous system. And it's not till the last few decades where our understanding of particles rather than just viruses or bacteria has entered into the realm of transmissible disease. These are diseases which are extremely rare, but at the same time, the burden is enormous.
I'm sure the Prime Minister is aware that in percentage terms, the population of United Kingdom and Ireland are the biggest reservoir of the prion that causes the fatal and incurable human brain disease variant CJD. One of the means of transmission is blood transfusion. In October last year, the government's scientific committee looking at this recommended the use of a filter for blood for transfusion for children initially. When is the government going to react to that recommendation?
Prime Minister. This is a very serious matter that he raises in great detail. That recommendation is obviously very important for the future of the blood transfusion service. I will look at it very carefully and I'll get back to him.
We are spending in the UK more than 130 million a year in order to prevent this negligible risk.
The safety of the blood supply, such as in the UK with adding filters, is just one step in trying to prevent one particle or one agent in terms of entering into the supply.
And if we introduce the Primum filter, I really don't believe in it because, nobody has ever found the Primum in patients, in the peripheral blood of patients with variant CJD.
Today, it's 100 million pounds sterling for one agent. Tomorrow, it may be 200 million sterling for another agent. So we will never reach the plateau in terms of making blood safety. There's always going to be something that we're going to need to do to maintain this safety. And of course, that's always going to translate to added costs, which are significant.
I believe that UK blood is much safer. I wouldn't be transfused in the USA. And if I needed a transfusion, I would rather go have a transfusion in the UK.
The UK has probably one, if not the safest, blood supply in the world. What does that mean? That means that from an infectious agents that we are aware of, those have been able to be eradicated or removed from the blood supply. It doesn't make that blood supply not have any implication in terms of non-infectious risks, nor does it protect us from the future in terms of any other organism entering into that blood supply.
So every decade has kind of had its own new set of challenges, and we're still concerned that there are others to evolve.
The cost of a unit transfused in the early stages of the Iraqi war could have exceeded $9,000 per unit.
К сожалению, наверное, как и во всем мире, в России то же самое, увеличивается и увеличивается стоимость одной единицы крови. Если не переливать кровь, то это стоит гораздо дешевле. Если мы, наверное, еще возьмем, мы не считаем, к сожалению, во всем мире считают осложнения, которые могут возникнуть при переливании крови. Если это посчитать, то это, наверное, выйдет в адские деньги. Но мы, к сожалению, пока этого не считаем.
In Australia, when you get a transfusion, on average, it's around 2 to 2.5 units. So every time somebody gets a transfusion in Australia, we're going to spend about $2,000. In the US, the estimate is a single unit of blood may cost as much as $1,200 per unit.
When we start looking at not only the cost of allogeneic blood transfusion, but also the negative outcomes associated with transfusion, I think that that's when hospitals start to recognize they're spending an inordinate amount of dollars or yens, wherever you are in the world, yet they're not achieving the relative outcome for that expense.
There is a risk of not being able to continue to maintain an available blood supply for the needs in the future. The ratio of those older persons who we now know receive blood transfusions at about 6 times the rate of the rest of the population, their numbers are growing quickly, so the ratio between older people being transfused and those donating blood is in fact declining quickly.
The need of blood increases continuously due to demographic changes. 20 years ago, nobody operated on patients with 80 years, but today this is routine.
There is a shortage, an acute shortage in the bank when you talk about voluntary donors. They're obviously shrinking all over the world, and definitely in areas where HIV endemicity is high. It's difficult to get donors. Then, of course, it's expensive. Those who have relatives or friends who are willing to donate for them, then they bring them along.
As blood's got safer, it seems to have got scarcer. And therefore, as hematologists, we've had to consider how best to use blood, but also what are the alternatives that we can use.
Вы знаете, это вообще уникальный человек, академик Андрей Иванович Воробьев. Ну, почему уникальный? Вот как уникальность его в том, как ученого. Ведь он первый у нас в стране создал мощную службу такую по заготовке и хранению крови. И он первый у нас в стране в конце 20 века, который начал говорить о том, что переливать кровь – это не так уж хорошо. Вот в этом уникальность его. То есть первый начал говорить, что надо заготавливать кровь, и первый, который начал пропагандировать то, что кровь, переливание крови не так уж хорошо для пациента. И вот у него есть одно великолепное выражение, которое я тоже всегда повторяю студентам и врачам во время лекции, о том, что кровь, выпущенная из организма, это уже не кровь. Это принципиально новая субстанция с новыми неизвестными свойствами. Кровь ее можно называть, когда она циркулирует в сосудах, в моих сосудах, в ваших сосудах, то есть в сосудах пациента. Когда выпустили, это совершенно уже другое вещество.
There are practically no repercussions of a moral nature. The principal concern is of another nature, whether this device, this mechanical device, will support his life.
There are remarkable people like Dr. Cooley down in Houston who has done thousands